Coast Guard members, there's a TTP, Tactics, Techniques, and Practices booklet. It's their guideline, right, on food safety and sanitation. So food safety and sanitation, TTP, right? Military, it's all about acronyms, and government stuff is acronyms. So that's the TTP. In here, when these members graduate school and they go off to the unit, or they gain rank and they move on to a new unit, it says create a CCP. That's what it says. It says create your CCPs. But it doesn't say what a CCP is. Okay? So based on our training, no one tells them what a CCP is in that booklet that the Coast Guard wrote and that all the members are supposed to follow, because that's their guideline on food safety and sanitation. But it meshes with the medical manual and the food service manual. There's other manuals that it meshes with, right? I'm only concerned with this one because this is the class I give. So, hazard analysis, critical control point. They say create critical control points, but what does that mean? All right, so let's cover what that means. First, to understand this, it goes back, HACCP was developed in the 60s and 70s from the, it was the Army, the Air Force, NASA, obviously, and the Pillsbury-Doughboy, because Pillsbury Company. It was developed for the space program, for the astronauts going into space. They had to have safe food in order to stay safe up in space. So that food. HACCP was developed literally by rocket scientists, right? So here, and it is a scientific, systematic approach to food safety. There are 5 preliminary steps and 7 steps to HACCP, right? So let's talk about the 7 steps to HACCP first. Is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Verification, verification, verification. You verify everything is true and right, and you actually walk this space as you go through to make sure things are, it's not just written on a piece of paper and ignored. You actually see that things are being done appropriately, properly, and it's 3 verifications. So it verifies the immediate supervisor, verifies the employees. The health department verifies what's going on. And normally, a third-party company is paid to come and verify to make sure, outside eyes, fresh eyes, right? Record keeping, it's all about record keeping. You have to keep records for HACCP. Hazard analysis and critical control point is a food safety management system planned to make sure that the food, from soup to nuts, right? From purchasing and receiving and storing and prepping and cooking and holding and cooling and reheating and serving, this is what we call the flow of food. At every step of the way, anything, any problems can be prevented, eliminated, or reduced to safe levels, right? This is what it's all about. In this, when I purchase, I have to purchase from that approved, reputable supplier. When I receive it, I got to check it in. I got to take the temperatures. I got to put it away properly and immediately and in the correct order so bad things don't drip on other things, right? So purchasing, receiving, storing. When I store food, it has to be in appropriate temperatures and organization and controllable situations, right? So anywhere in the process, the flow of food through the operation, and I say from soup to nuts, so from start to finish, by the time it goes in someone's mouth, right? We have to make sure it's safe food. HACCP is saying all of this needs to be identified and controlled and paid attention to, right? So anywhere where you can prevent the problem from happening in the first place. Good. Because I'm on that line of thought, let's go over that. So a CCP, all of these are control points, but which one is the critical control point? It's these, where we can prevent, eliminate, or reduce to safe levels. So how do you prevent salmonella from growing in the food during storage, right? Because and here's my thermometer, right? We are working with risks and hazards, so hazards or contaminants and risks. I'm going to run out of room here. So the risks, there's 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we'll get there in just a minute. But the overall thing for us to remember as I jump around a little bit is, how do I prevent salmonella from growing in the food during storage? First, we're preventing it from who we buy from, right? Or preventing it from coming in. But if I'm buying poultry, salmonella is going to be there. And if I leave it on the countertop in room temperature, in what we call the temperature danger zone, right? That's where the bacteria will thrive and grow. Just like us, we like a nice warm environment. We live in a warm environment, right? If it's too hot, we sit under a tree and we slow down. If it's too cold, we stay in the house, right? We slow down. But during a nice day, we're out on the soccer field or whatever. So same thing with bacteria, because they're alive, they're living. Right? So 41 degrees to 135 degrees is what we call our temperature danger zone, our TDZ, right? TDZ. And within there, these are some big numbers, is from 70 to 125 is what I call that double danger zone. That's meant to be an exclamation point, okay? So the TDZ overall, the answer to your test is 41 to 135. That's the catch-all number for the temperature danger zone. But the bacteria grow really quickly between 70 and 125 because that's very comfortable in there for them, right? So with this, how do I prevent salmonella from growing in the fridge? Purchasing, receiving, storing. Okay, storing would be my critical control point for salmonella. Right? What is my critical control point for E. coli? How do I eliminate E. coli in a hamburger? Purchasing, receiving, storing, prepping, cooking. Right? Cook to kill. That's my CCP for E. coli in eliminating if it happens to be there. Right? And then reducing to safe levels. When I clean my countertop, I use a 3-pan method. I'll do this real quick. I have just like a 3-compartment sink, right? 3-compartment sink has soapy water, right? Those are my bubbles. Rinse water, and then either a chemical in the third one. So this is soap or detergent. This is rinse, and this is sanitize with either chemical or temperature. In our case, I'm talking about this table. I can't fit that table in the 3-compartment sink. Pots and pans and dishes go over there, but I can't put a table in it. So how do I clean my table? In our environment, we use a 3-pan method. So I have 3 buckets. One of them is a green bucket. It's about that big. I don't have it with me. A little white bucket. It's about that big. And a little red bucket. It's about that big. And with this, I'm going to have a chemical. Either chlorine, iodine, which I've only seen that used once in 40 years, and quats, quaternary ammonium compound. So traditionally, it's either a little splash of chlorine in there to the perfect ratio, and then there's test strips to make sure to verify that the sanitizer is at the appropriate level to kill off the majority, reducing the pathogen load. So on the table, if I have 1,000,000 bacteria and I wash and I rinse, most of them go away, and then I sanitize, that kills off anything, everything that's there. And from 1,000,000, I might have 100 left. I'm reducing to acceptable levels, right? When you go to the doctor and you have an operation, what does the doctor do? They cut you open, but before they cut you open for the operation, what do they do to all those tools and equipment? They sterilize it. Sterilize is one thing, 100% clean, right? Oh, and that reminds me, this part, soap and rinse, is cleaning, and this one is sanitizing. Two different animals, two different things. Okay? So make sure that we clean first, get rid of all the stuff, then we sanitize, because if we don't clean properly, the sanitizer is just on top of all the nastiness. If I have oil and grease and food and I try to just sanitize the oil, grease, and food, then I have the oil, grease, and food is still hiding the bacteria underneath, right? They call it biomass, right? On the handle of a refrigerator door, if I'm touching it with chicken hands, right? I'm touching raw chicken, I have salmonella and goo all over my fingers, and I touch that handle and I open the door, now I just left the pathogen on that handle, and everybody else comes through and touches it, and if there's many things, then it builds up over time, and it hides the bacteria, protects the bacteria. And even if I sanitize that handle, it's hiding underneath everything. So before I sanitize the handle, I have to wash it and rinse it first to get rid of that biomass that is loaded on those handles, right? So throughout the galley, throughout the kitchen, we're always washing and rinsing and sanitizing. That is our job. That is one of our major things to prevent illness, right? In the 1800s, people were just willy-nilly and they would have towels on their shoulders and like that. And that's wrong. And you watch a lot of these TV, I won't even go there. But there's a lot of cross-contamination with and potentials for harm, potentials for illness. We want to prevent that. HACCP is, and active managerial control, is what we're after to prevent that. All right, let's get back to where I was. So, TDZ, temperature danger zone, 41 to 135. What I call the double danger zone, 70 to 125. Well, I was in the Army, so I'll say every once in a while. Okay, HACCP, hazard analysis, critical control point. So the TTP from the Coast Guard says create CCPs. Great, what is it? Now we know what a CCP is. Anywhere in the process, the flow of food, where you can prevent it, eliminate it, or reduce to safe and acceptable levels, right? So each one of these would be a critical control point. So with this, there's 7 principles to HACCP, right? We have to do a hazard analysis of the food. So when you look at a menu, and you, in this book, if you turn to chapter 1, there's all these TCS foods. TCS foods means food that needs, so TCS. In many of the other, much of the other literature, and guidance and older ServSafe books and older books, there are the older term, right? So when you talk to older people like me, we grew up on the older term, which is PHF, potentially hazardous food. So when you're talking to a lot of people, it'll be PHF food, potentially hazardous food. And now they're pushing the new term, TCS food, food that needs time and temperature control for safety. So I put a small t in front of the big T to help me remember time and temperature control. What does that mean? Here, this is my temperature danger zone. My refrigerators must be below 41 degrees. Why? Because salmonella begins growing at 42, right? So we want to keep it below 41. So that's my temperature in here. This is what we call, everybody calls it, the bacterial growth curve. So this is a lag phase, log phase, stationary and decline. Lag, logarithmic growth, stationary, where there's no more room, and death or decline phase. So this is the number of bacteria, and this is time, right? The number of bacteria as it goes forward. So if I cough or sneeze on a sandwich, and I send you hiking up to Mount Tamalpais in Marin County over by the coast, and you're up there for 6, 10 hours, and then you open your sandwich and you decide to have your sandwich, but I sneezed on it, right, earlier on, and it's in your backpack, so it's in the temperature danger zone for all those hours. The bacteria that we carry in us, potentially, in our hair, nose, throats, open wounds, open sores, when we cough, sneeze, spit, drool, is staph, right? S-T-A-P-H comes from the S-T-A-F-F, from us, humans. Not everybody carries it, but a lot of people do. So what must we do in a galley or a kitchen? We have to wash our hands. We have to cover our sneeze. We have to be healthy. It's all about being healthy, right? So staph comes from the staph, it gets on that sandwich, and then when the people go up there and have lunch, as Mount Tamalpais, and then all of a sudden they have vomiting, right, within a half hour, because it grows. Some bacteria grow and turn poisonous before you eat it. Some bacteria grow in your gut over time and you get sick a week later. Some bacteria grow inside of you and then turn toxic and destroy you, like E. coli, right? HUS, hemolytic uremitic syndrome, shut down your kidneys and you can die, right? In 1993, the Jack in the Box incident. 1993 was a big year. It was the first FDA food code. It was the Jack in the Box incident, which now they've just taken it and they are so food safety focused, and you know, they're leaders in the food safety realm. So the incidents in the past have caused progress throughout time. When I started in 1979 in the restaurant industry as a young kid, I was washing dishes in a pizza place in Sausalito, and then the delicatessen next door as I was a young teenager. You know, food safety, food focus, it has just grown, and it's a huge focus. And HACCP was from the 60s and 70s. So 60s, 70s, and I'm getting back to that. I know everything kind of rolls around in my head, but it takes time, effort, energy, focus, and new thoughts, new ideas, new research, new studies in order to make things grow. And then these rocket scientists come up with a plan on how to keep people safe, especially in this case it was the astronauts. But now it's bled off to the meat industry, the poultry industry, fish industry, juice industry, milk industry, canning, right? Canning industry. So many, anytime you process, so here we go, let's do this. What are the 6 things that bacteria need to grow? So we use the acronym FATTOM: food, acid, time, temperature, oxygen, and moisture. Okay? FATTOM: food, acid, time, temperature, oxygen, moisture. So remember TCS food? What does it mean? Food that needs time and temperature control for safety. We have to keep it either in the refrigerator or in a hot holding pattern above 135. If I cook a chicken to 165, because that's the temperature I'm supposed to cook it to, 165, right? And then I put it in a pan, I put it on the hot holding pattern for service in my galley down here, which is, think of it like a buffet or a cafeteria, right? School cafeteria. So sneeze guards are on the other side, serving people are on this side with the hot food, 1 utensil per product, but all that food, it was cooked to the right temperature first to kill off, right? Cook to kill the bacteria, right? Cook to kill the salmonella and make it safe. 1. Then put it in that hot holding pattern. But if you keep it at 165 or higher, it's going to overcook. So we keep it at 135 because science says, that's where this comes from, that 135 prevents new bacteria from growing, right? So anything over 135, there's no bacteria growing, in our case, in our realm of galleys and cooks, right, and chefs. But once it drops below 135, then if there happened to be some type of bacteria, it could potentially, just like everything, grow. Now, because there have been outbreaks over the years, it stands to reason we want to protect people from that. All right, so the TDZ, temperature danger zone, 41 to 135, right? TCS food is, the old word is potentially hazardous food. The new term is TCS, or time and temperature control. So that's my temperature, and here's my time. The answer, maybe 4 hours, right? If I sneeze on that sandwich, the lag time, the bacteria is just settling into the environment. They haven't started growing yet. They're settling in. They're getting accustomed to the environment within this 4-hour time frame-ish, right? So within that time frame. Then, once they're comfortable, then they start growing. And every 20 minutes they double. So it's 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, into the millions after a few hours. 10 hours, it's quite a bit, right? Pretty soon the bacteria goes to a certain level, it covers that food. There's no more room for it to grow and thrive, so they start dying off. And as they die off is the stationary phase, and then there's the death or the decline phase. And some bacteria will die off and create toxins, right? So this bacterial growth curve over time, our answer is 4 hours or more in the temperature danger zone can cause illness, right? So we live in the lag phase. We stay within this 4-hour time frame as we're feeding people food. So for instance, if I were to bake a lasagna, pull it out of the oven, put it on a table, picnic table out here in the quad, and just let it sit there. There's no sterno, no ice, no hot holding, no nothing. It's sitting on a picnic table, just like you would go to a family picnic sitting on a table. How long can that hot food sit there? Well, once it drops below 135, from 135, 4 hours. Maybe there's bacteria there, maybe there's not. We don't know. We think we cook to kill because a lasagna gets really hot, but maybe somebody coughed on it after it, right? Or something else. Maybe there's, and I'll get to these afterwards, but, so 4 hours, the hot food. This is called time as a public health control. I know I'm going away from HACCP, but I need to bring us all together first before I move on. All right. Then, what if I have a potato salad next to it, or a macaroni salad? I make a nice macaroni salad and I pull it out of the refrigerator and I put it on the table out in the quad next to the lasagna. So I pull it out of the fridge at 41 and now it's rising and it's cold. The bacteria grow colder here, right? If it's dropping down, the bacteria on the lasagna is growing faster if it's there because it's warm and comfortable for the bacteria to grow. But here, I'm pulling it from refrigerated temperature, and it's coming up. It's coming up. So long as it stays below 70 degrees, that's that key number for quite a few things, 70 degrees, then I have 6 hours of time, so long as I label it and I have an SOP. If I'm going to use this technique called time as a public health control, I have to have a written SOP, which means standard operating procedure, approved by the health department to do this technique. So it's a game changer for catering companies and small events like that. They use this, right? You have to tag the piece of the food, right, the pan that says this food needs to be, this is my tag, the name of the food, lasagna, Mr. F. The time it was removed from heat temperature control, so at 12 o'clock noon, and the time it must be sold, consumed, or discarded, or enjoyed is 1600, which is 4 hours later, or for you guys, it's 4 p.m., right? So this is a lasagna, 4 hours, because it's hot food. Cold food, I'll have another tag, and I'll have, so long as it stays below 70 degrees, so I'll put a little 70 down here. I pull it out of the refrigerator at 12. It can be till 1800 or 6 p.m., right? And this is potato salad. Also Mr. F. These tags, they're pieces of tape that are actually tagged on there so that everybody working there knows the information. And based on the SOP and the proper training of your staff members, everybody knows how to do this and what it means. And when the health inspectors come in, because when I was at the pie shop, so I did county fairs, farmers markets, and we would take food out to these for hours. And if I didn't have some type of thing, the health department, they come and they inspect you on day one, and like at the county fair, I'm there for 2 weeks. They come and inspect periodically within those 2 weeks, and I had to be straight. So I had to have my SOP, I had to have my proper tags on the food items if they were sitting out for an amount of time. If they were a TCS food, right? There's certain foods that are TCS foods. There's other foods which are ready to eat, or RTE foods, right? So with all this, oh, and one more thing. There's always one more thing. 4 hours hot food, 6 hours cold food, so long as it stays below 70 degrees sitting on a table. How long can food be stored, prepared food? I make the potato salad, the macaroni salad, I make a lasagna, I cool it off, I put it in the fridge. How long can it be in my refrigerator for the test and because the way bacteria grow? 7 days in the refrigerator below 41 degrees because of a special bacteria called Listeria. All right? Listeria grows, Listeria monocytogenes grows in the refrigerator, grows outside the refrigerator, grows all the way through here. What temperature is freezing? On a cold day when it's freezing outside, really cold, 32 degrees, right? What temperature is my freezer machine? 0 degrees. Right? So freezer machine, 0, 32 is freezing. That's where the bacteria stops. Maybe 34, I think, for Listeria, but regardless, it's in the refrigerator and it's potentially growing. It's growing slow because it's cold, but it's still growing. So that's why we have 7 days of shelf life in a refrigerator for prepared foods that we make, right? Otherwise, if we open a can, jar, bottle, we have a use by or expiration date on there, then we kind of follow that. And even those are kind of a best by date. It's very seldom that they are a drop dead date. Even though maybe your SOP, at CIA, 10 days passed. For milk, it was 10 days past that date. We could still use it within 10 days. You know, it's okay. So it's a best by date. Now here at the Coast Guard, it's a drop dead date. So if it hits that date, it goes in the trash. That's just the way it is. So we have to use that product before it hits that date. That's the key. This, no chef would actually hold food in a fridge for 7 days because that's a waste of money. You're sitting on money the whole time, and I get that, right? So, and for Coast Guard rules, the longest we can hold something prepared is 72 hours, so 3 days. That's their SOP, that's their rule. So we don't do the 7 days, but the answer for the test is 7 days based on the temperature danger zone and Listeria growing in the fridge. Right? Listeria causes pregnant women to lose the baby, kills old people, young people, immune-compromised people, right? The high-risk populations. So there's certain foods that can't go to hospitals and nursing homes and daycare centers because those are high-risk populations. Hospitals and nursing homes, they have HACCP, they run HACCP. They're paying attention to all of this because that's the job for the people in the kitchen in those type of operations. Regular restaurants, kind of willy-nilly, kind of, depending on the restaurant, but I've seen some horrible ones, and I've seen some awesome ones. When I was in school, my team and I, we would go out to different restaurants and we'd ask chef, hey, can we come back to the kitchen and see? And some of them were like, yeah, come on back, we'd love to show you around because we're proud. And the other ones were like, no, we don't want you back here because, and they shouldn't, rightly. You know, we might be dirty, we might be carrying something, we shouldn't be going in the kitchen anyway. But maybe they're hiding something too. So, depends on operations. Anyway, hopefully we have that. Temperature danger zone, what bacteria need to grow is the acronym FATTOM, food, acid, time, temperature, oxygen, and moisture, which I'm going to cover shortly. The flow of food, purchasing, receiving, and storing, and prepping, and cooking, and holding, and cooling, and reheating, and serving. The bacterial growth curve, number of bacteria over time, depending on which type of bacteria, some turn toxic on the backside, right? And you get poisoned right away. Some things, which I'll get into later, it can take 6 weeks to 2 months before you get sick. So we'll get there. Records, 2 months to 6 weeks. Because I'm talking about records, and because the oyster companies and shellfish companies must run HACCP, right? Here we have fish and shellfish. have to run HACCP. They have to test the water. There's an acceptable amount of poo in the water, right? There's fish, there's birds, there's sea lions, there's human waste that gets out there. When it rains, the wash comes off of the hills into the bay, and they have to wait for the ebb and flow of the water to clean up the bay, and the oysters just consume. They sit on a rock, or the culture method, they're on a rope, right? Or they're in bags, but they don't go anywhere. So whatever the water brings to them is what they consume. And oftentimes it's either red tide toxic algae, or it could be the feces, which would be viruses that we're worried about. So the two that we're worried about is hepatitis A and norovirus, which I'll cover in a little bit. Well, I'll cover this part now because we're talking about records. With shellfish comes a shell stock identification tag. It's a little piece of paper that says, gives all the information. So in a restaurant, we serve the shellfish to the customers consume the shellfish, and 2 months later, they are jaundice, yellowing of the eyes, yellowing of the skin, liver problems, right? Because the hepatitis A virus attacks the liver. There's other hepatitis viruses that attack the liver also. It may not be Hep A, it may be another cause for jaundice, but we don't know. But if it's a hepatitis A virus, that's a reportable disease for food service. It's one of the big six, which I'll go over in a little bit too. Anyway, record keeping. We must keep that shell stock identification tag for 90 days from the date we served the last shellfish. So if I get a bag of shellfish, I keep the tag with the shellfish, and on day number 1, I serve, if I have 100, right? I serve 30 the first day, 30 the second day, and the remainder on the last day. Then I take the tag off. Then I take my Sharpie pen. I write the date. I put it in my file. 2 months later, within that 2 months, if anybody were to get sick, they blame my restaurant. The health department comes to me and says, hey, there's an outbreak. Where's your shellfish tags? And you hand them your tags. And then they can backtrack and they can investigate. So we keep these tags for 90 days because it can take up to 60 days, 2 months, for people to get sick with Hep A. It takes a long time for it to start. So that's why we keep it for 90 days. It gives the health department that extra month to track. And a lot of times we just keep these things for like a year or 2 years before we purge them oftentimes. So it depends on the operation. All right, clear as mud? Good, all right. Let's do this. So I have, let's get back to HACCP itself. Potentially hazardous food is the old term. TCS food is the new term. Hazards is the old term. Contaminants is the new term. It's the same thing. What are the 3 contaminants that could potentially get into food? And there's others, but the 3 is biological, chemical, and physical, right? So what's an example of a biological contaminant in, we'll go with a hamburger. Biological contaminant in a hamburger would be what? E. coli is one. There's others, but E. coli, right? So E. coli, when there's a hamburger, when there's one animal and it gets slaughtered, butchered down, and served as steak, it's from the one single animal, and it's less likely to become contaminated if they do it right. When there's hamburger, they take all the scraps from that animal and add it to 1,000 other animals and put it in a big grinder and grind it up into burger. Right? So all the bits and pieces go into, from all these many, many, many animals, turns into hamburgers. So if one bad animal and the feces from that animal during the butchering process is still there, it can contaminate the entire product line. So biological, we'll say E. coli. Okay? E. coli. A few years ago, 10 years ago or 12 years ago, Chef Jamie Oliver, who's a UK chef, he called out pink slime burgers, pink slime. And he made a video and he showed that ammonia it's a process, just like in our water treatment. We filter water for drinking, right? In cities, towns, everywhere, most everywhere, unless you're on a well, an individual home well. And then they inject chlorine into the piping after the filtration in order to keep the water safe, to prevent bacteria from growing inside the pipes and making people sick with different types of bacteria from water, right? So water is a consumable, ice is a consumable. They can become contaminated, and they do oftentimes. So the water treatment people, I was a water treatment guy for 2 years. I was a D2, a distribution 2, and a treatment 2, and a backflow tester for 2 years. And so I learned a lot about that. I've been doing the food safety things and the water treatment, water safety. I had to do that too, so I would have that experience in order to fold it into food safety, because they go hand in hand. We have safe water makes safe food, dirty water makes dirty food. Okay? All right. So prevent, eliminate, reduce to safe levels. Chef Jamie Oliver. So he did this video, and he's going through the schools, and what he does is awesome. What his whole world is about is so terrific. So we do use chemicals in food safety. There was a cantaloupe outbreak where cantaloupes went through a wash, and then there was supposed to be a sanitizing at the end in order to kill off whatever's on the outside before it went to market. Unfortunately, the sanitizer wasn't enough. Sanitizer reduced to acceptable levels, and the bacteria was still on. Listeria, the one that grows in the fridge, went off to market, and a lot of people got sick from listeria and cantaloupes a few years ago. Not intentional, it just happened. So we use chemicals in food service to keep us safe. Chlorine was used in water in 1908, I think. A doctor jumped over a fence and dosed the water system with chlorine, and everybody in that area didn't get sick anymore. And so from then on, it went from place to place to place, city to city to city, and everybody went into either chlorine or chloramines in order to keep the public safe from drinking water, right? In England, there was one well that was contaminated. Is that right? I forget the story. There was a certain inspector or investigator who found that people in this neighborhood were safe because they were drinking beer all the time, right? The alcohol instead of the water in that particular neighborhood. I don't remember exactly. Anyway, we'll get off that track. Chemical. So he was talking about the ammonia in the meat, and yeah, so there could be ammonia or other chemicals. Too much gets into the food. Too much of something, right? But there are MCLs, maximum MCLs, maximum contaminant level in the water industry, and they talk about this, so you can't exceed certain things in water treatment. If you look at every year, they have to send out a letter of the water quality, and it's a consumer CCR, Consumer Confidence Report, from the water treatment plant. Wherever you live, you'll get it in the mail, and it'll say what's in your water that you're drinking. So my recommendation is get a filter and filter that stuff out, because it's there. There's chemicals in there, there's other things in there at acceptable levels. Before water treatment, many more people were dying every year from contaminated water. After water treatment, fewer people are dying from contaminated water here in certain areas, but there's other things that get in the water that cause problems also. Toxic metals causes brain damage and things like that. Anyway, filter, filter, filter. Even under your sink, anything you drink, put a filter under there. Reverse osmosis is great, but it wastes a lot of water too, because it has to have the exchange, right? So let's go on. Hazard. What are the three contaminants? Biological, chemical, physical. The same as hazards. HA, or hazard, is the old term, contaminant is the new term. So bio, chem, and phys. What's a physical contaminant in a hamburger? Could be a bone. Okay? So you can do this with every food item there is. What could be in a chicken? Salmonella. What could be in the chicken? A bone. What could be chemical in the chicken? Maybe nothing, okay? So we analyze the food, hazard analysis. So we HA, get rid of all this. HA, hazard analysis of the food. Then we determine, okay, we analyze biological, chemical, and physical. What could be there? What could cause problems? What could hurt people, kill people? Then, what are we going to do about it? So then we have to determine the CCPs. All right, so we determined, how do I prevent salmonella from growing? Down here, purchasing, receiving, storing. Store it below 41 degrees, because then salmonella won't grow to excessive levels on that product, right? And then we cook it soon. And we cook to kill, which would be another CCP, right? To kill off the bacteria, because it's living, alive, we need to kill it. So we determine, we analyze the food, everything. When I look at a restaurant menu, I can look at every piece on the menu and see, oh, that's a potential problem, that's a problem, that's a problem. And I talked about the hamburger in E. coli. There was a huge outbreak of E. coli in lettuce, romaine lettuce, right, the last couple of years. And they're doing genetic testing. They can track it all the way back to home of record, which there was 2 places, in Salinas, California, and Yuma, Arizona. Because of the feces from the animals gets into the water gets onto the crops don't get washed when it gets to the restaurant. When you get your food from your approved, reputable supplier, they don't wash it for you, right? Some of these places will, and it goes through, and even those ones have been contaminated. So wash your own product first before you serve anybody. All right, so the 7 steps to HACCP is you're creating the plan. But yeah, let's do this first, okay? Because there's five preliminary steps I want to go over first, or after. So this makes sense. Hazard analysis, biological, chemical, physical. Okay, I'm going to get off that. CCP, what's a CCP? Which one is the critical one? Anywhere you can either prevent it, eliminate, or reduce to acceptable levels. That's the critical one. Then we want to determine the critical limits. Critical limits. So in my storing of refrigerated poultry to prevent salmonella, what is my critical limit? What is the temperature that I must keep the refrigeration to prevent the growth, the rapid and progressive growth of the bacteria? 41, right? 41. So my critical limit is 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Right? Now, I'm going to monitor. How do I monitor food? What tool do we use as cooks to monitor product, right? Is a thermometer. So I'm going to monitor what's going on in my world, because I'm active managerial control. I'm an active manager. I'm paying attention, right? So the critical limit is going to be 41. That's what I need. That's my requirement. That's my standard. Then I monitor. Oops. And my temperature, well, let's do this other one. What's my eliminate E. coli? Purchase, receive, store, prep, cook. So what is my critical limit? What's the temperature I must cook a hamburger to in order to kill E. coli? 155, right? So that is my critical limit for this. 155 degrees for the E. coli. Right? If it was salmonella in a poultry, it'd be 165 degrees Fahrenheit. That's my critical limit, right? For a poultry. This is for a hamburger. Critical limit. That's where I have to go in order to make it safe. And I keep records. So I monitor. I take my thermometer and I poke these things. And I make sure. But oops, this one's only at 120 degrees Fahrenheit. What is my corrective action? How do I correct that problem? 120 degrees for a hamburger. How do I correct it? How do I make it 155? Continue cooking, right? Cook it to 155 plus. That's the corrective action. Fix the problem. So with HACCP, hazard analysis, you look at the food, determine what. Then you figure out how to keep it safe. Does all that make sense, I hope? So you analyze it, then you create your critical control point list of where you need to focus. Then, and an operation, this plan, if you write it, it's a written plan. It's a scientific, systematic approach to food safety, and it's a written plan, and it needs to be followed from the top person to the bottom person. Everybody needs to record the numbers, the levels, and everything else. And there are electronic systems where you just zap a code and it goes into the computer. In the old days, it was clipboards, right? So, but it's all about actively doing it. So I said up here that all these different operations have to have a HACCP plan to make sure food is safe. And they tried to get it into restaurants, and restaurants were like, nah, we don't have time for that. We don't have time for record keeping. We're just in the trenches putting food out to our customers. We don't have time for any of this. Some restaurants do it, and do it well. Some restaurants do the voluntary. In 2006, the volume came out for voluntary HACCP for restaurants and retail establishments, right? Which is different than, there's different types of HACCP, right? I work with retail HACCP at the restaurant style level if we do it. All the other ones have major HACCP systems they must follow, like the meat industry, the poultry, the juice, the milk industry, right? And so whenever you have opportunity, request letters of guarantee from those companies for your records, saying that they have their own HACCP system and everything else. All right? So this is HACCP portion in a nutshell. And stay there. But we need to have, how do we put it together? If we're going to do it, we have to put it together. So there are 5 preliminary, 2, 3, 4, 5, to help to establish a HACCP system, right? So you have to verify, 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 have a flow chart, a real one, so you can actually see it. You have to walk the flow chart to see what's going on. Determine the product, determine product, and distribution. Okay. Assemble the team. What does that mean? Assemble the team. So you have a whole team of people. If you're in a, let's call it a hospital or a hotel, right? So you have different departments. You have the kitchen, you have the service area, you have the janitorial staff, but everybody has to be on the same page. So we have, and the maintenance people and things like that. And so you get the team together. So you have the chef, you have the general manager, you have the manager for the maintenance crew, you have the manager for, and you assemble the team and you all brainstorm, this is what we're doing, how are we going to make it work? So you assemble the team and you gather your resources, gather the resources. What are the resources? Well, here in California, we have CalCode, California Retail Food Code. And it changes, just like the food code, right? The first food code was 1993. It's a recommendation to the industry of what we're supposed to do, based on research and study and information that the that they come up with. So let's see, FDA food code, the CDC, EPA, USDA, FSIS, CFP, Public Health Service. So the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, they control air and water, but they still have information that's applicable to what we do. USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, they inspect and regulate meat, poultry, and eggs. And the FDA, everything else, including fish. The fish has the Fisheries Department, which falls under NOAA. Anyway, so there's a whole thing. The answer is USDA inspects and grades meat, poultry, and eggs, and the FDA does everything else. But these organizations, the Food Safety Inspection Service, the Conference for Food Protection, the Public Health Service, the Conference for Food Protection are all the experts, academia and scientists, and every 2 years this group of people get together to look at the FDA food code and recommend guidance and movement forward for these group of this system that we're doing, okay? So the Food and Drug Administration does a model food code, in essence, every 4 years-ish, right? Maybe it's an extra year here or a minus year there. And then every 2 years, they kind of do a supplement. So some years they have a supplement, some years they don't. But all of these organizations do study and research, and they feed information up to the FDA, and the writers of the food code do it every 4 years, or with a supplement every 2 years. This is a recommendation to the industry of what we're supposed to do. When it becomes law is at the state or tribal or local level, right? So in the United States, California has Cal Code, everybody else follows a different food code. It could be a 2005 food code, it could be a 13 food code, it might be a 17 food code, and currently we're in the 2022 food code. So it all depends on which food code that they're following. And if everybody follows the most updated one, then okay. California's Cal Code was based on the 2005 food code, and it kind of grows as we go. All right. So with the HACCP, when you're putting it together, you gather the people together, and then you gather the resources. So you have your food code, your recipes, your menu items, your maintenance information, everything that can go into this package, because it is a written package. And then you determine how it's going to flow. So depending on what you're making. All right, let's do this again. I have my temperature danger zone, 41, 135, right? And bacteria, what bacteria needs to grow is food, acid, time, temperature, oxygen, moisture. For restaurants, for our chefs, time and temperature is the easiest control. But anytime you do acid, you get in trouble. No, anytime you control or manipulate acid, oxygen, or moisture as cooking techniques for preservation, that's when acid, oxygen, moisture for preservation, not just for flavor and serving you immediately, but for actually preserving it and sitting on the shelf for an amount of time, then you have to create a HACCP plan, especially for oxygen. Oxygen, I said that Listeria, so Listeria is a facultative bacteria, meaning that's why sous vide cooking, a lot of people are freaked out. The health department people, health inspectors are freaked out about sous vide and cryovacking and all that stuff, because the potential for Listeria, 32 degrees, and botulism, 38 degrees. Botulism E, C-bot, echo, is one that grows in the refrigerator. It can. And Listeria monocytogenes, also grows in the fridge. And botulism is an anaerobic bacteria, so it grows without oxygen. So if you take away the oxygen, if you put it in a cryovac bag, and I'll get into spores here in a minute, it may create an environment good for the spore bacteria to grow, right? So the fish industry, for instance, cryovac fish has to, and seafood has to be frozen before, during, after, immediately. Not just, so while it's slacking out, you need to cut it out of the bag because of botulism in seafood. shellfish, crabs, a lot of things because, and I'll get to that in a little bit, and listeria, all right? So oxygen. Here in California, we have to make the plan, we have to send it to California State Health Department, not the local health department, but it has to go to the California State Health Department with all your plans, procedures, SOPs, and they need to know that you know what you're talking about. So you can have some company come and write you a plan and then send it off to the state and they'll approve it, it comes back and you do willy-nilly stuff in your or kitchen and you're not following the plan really because you don't have interest in that plan. But you, the individual chef, if you write your own plan, then you understand your own plan and then you do it properly. So remember, the food safety people don't care about quality, they care about people staying alive after eating food. And I know you want that too, because you need to stay in business. All right, if you're going to be smoking or curing, doing the moisture thing, or you're doing acidification for preservation, then you must have a HACCP plan in order to utilize those techniques. The oxygen one has to go to California State. The other ones can just be written up as a local plan. This is based on the Cal Code. In the back of the book, there's a little couple pages on HACCP on what it requires. So any questions, turn to the back of that book and review that. All right. So HACCP, we assemble the team, we gather resources, and then we determine the product, whatever the product is. If it's a, let's say it's a smoked meat that we're gonna, a beef jerky, right? And we're gonna send it throughout the country and put it on shelves in the grocery store. Then we determine the product, beef jerky, and its distribution. It's gonna go in 18-wheel trucks throughout the country for many, many hours in a warm environment. Then in our operation, we must draw a flow chart of when we purchase and we receive and we store, and then we go through the prep line, breaking it down, and then we go through the drying equipment, and then we go through the packaging equipment, and then we go through, and what kind of packaging is the equipment, right? So some friends of mine called me and they said, you know, we cryovac some fish and we were selling it, and the health department said we can't do that, we need a HACCP plan. I said, great, but if you have packaging that is 10,000 OTR, 10,000 plus, that plus sign is the most important thing. If the bag is 10,000 OTR, oxygen transfer rate plus, then based on the flow chart from the food safety people of California, or FDA, you don't need it. You don't need a HACCP plan, so long as enough air, oxygen, can transfer through the pores of the bag. So depending on the bag you use, so it's a special bag, and you have to have the special bag, you have to have the doggone specifications on it in your plan in a binder. So if a health inspector ever comes in, you pull out the binder and say, these are the bags we're using, they're 10,000 plus OTR, and this other chart from the FDA says I don't need a HACCP plan, but you need to go through your health inspector to verify all that stuff before you start doing it, and don't bump heads with them. Use them as your resource, okay? So we did that. They don't need a HACCP plan. They're using the correct bags. It's okay. Otherwise, saran wrap. You just saran wrap it, you know, and put it in the thing. But as long as it's safe. Keep your times, keep your temperatures, keep it safe. Everything is safe. All right, so now flow chart, and then verify, verify, verify. And more to come.